was one of the most scandalous things that Jesus ever said. Now, it doesn't seem scandalous to us because we're us living when we are living, but when Jesus said it, there would have been audible gasps. There would have been confusion. There would have been people saying, no, that can't be right. It was this conversation one day when his disciples came to him and said, hey, we're your disciples, and there was this guy, John, who also was a teacher like you, and he had disciples, and he taught them to pray. Will you teach us to pray like John taught his disciples? And Jesus said, okay. He said, now here's the most important thing. When you pray, say, Our Father. And there would have been just, wait, what? There would have been like gasps. Wait, are you suggesting that we could have the kind of intimate relationship with God where he would be our Father? That primary longing that is in every human heart to have and be known and be loved at the most intimate level of Father, I could have that with God. To have this understanding of someone who would be with me and faithful to me and always have my back, who would protect me and who would teach me. I can call God Father. You see, the idea would have been for the Jewish people that Abraham could be your father and you have your earthly fathers, but God was utterly other. He was different. He was far away. But Jesus said, no. God is the fulfillment of your greatest longing. That is actually what makes fathering so important. This thing that God gives to brave, honest men of integrity to say, I'm going to be there as a man for society, for my spouse, for children, for other people's children. I'm going to be a force to work for the common good because that is what God has done in creating me. I never thought in 36 years I've been a pastor that I'd have to speak so much about this one point that has become somehow or another a controversial point. It blows my mind. We here at Jacobswell just believe something, I guess, a little old-fashioned. We believe that there are men and there are women, and those are the categories. And that is determined by biology on the chromosomal level. And that somehow or another, when we make those things interchangeable and we say there's no distinction, there's no beautiful nobility about a woman and beautiful nobility about a man that are both complementary and yet distinct, somehow or another we're saying something rude or oppressive or crushing. We believe that God in his wisdom created us, and it's the miracle and the beauty of humanity. Now here's the thing about that, is that in our culture, there is a crisis among women, there's a crisis among men, but the crisis among men is being told to young men that it is not legitimate for you to be a man, for you to want to strive to be a man, that those natural impulses that God has put inside of you are something to be resisted, something to be ashamed of, something to apologize for. But let me just say something to you. If you are a young man, 14, 16, 17 years old, you are a man, and that is a good thing. If you are a man 19, 20, 21, let me just tell you, and maybe no one told you this, you are a man, and you are a grown-up man, okay? And you are responsible for your life. If you are a man 25, 30, 35, you are a man. You are a man with ability to influence and mentor and mold. And we need you to step up and to step in and not apologize and not become arrogant, but at the same time unashamedly be a man. If you're a man older than that, 40, 50, 60, you are a man who has the ability to establish legacy, to do great things. So if you are here today and you are a man, we want to celebrate you. And particularly if you are a father and you have the heart of a father. So maybe you don't have biological kids, maybe you have stepkids, maybe you're a coach, but you step in and you help young people become. Your role is crucial. And we are in a crisis because men are not being men. And we need to rediscover that. Now, one of the reasons it is because we have had a host of examples of bad men. We have had so many stories of pain of men who use what they had to do things that were not good. Men who were either absent or abusive or controlling. And so I want to just kind of coordinate us a little bit by having a conversation about the need for good, strong men. Now, this is a conversation we've had here before at Jacobswell, but I thought it was worth having again, particularly this Father's Day. Now, let me just talk about the 4 choices in this little graph here. You can have good men or bad men. And the standard for good and bad is the example of Jesus Christ. The nature and character of Jesus Christ, who was a man, who was a great man, who was a great leader, who showed us what it meant was to be an ultimate example of humanity, but specifically for our purposes today, he showed men how to be men. And weak and strong. And again, what does it look like to be a weak man or a strong man? Because when we understand what those distinctions are and what a man is supposed to do with his strength, it absolutely changes everything. So, if we think about these as 4 categories, understanding that at different times, different men can be in different quadrants. I certainly have been in all 4 of them at different times in my life. We need to have a conversation about who we are. And for you men here today, just understand you have a choice about the kind of person you're going to be, the kind of life you're going to live. And you have a choice to be who you are today or to be something better. You see, every day, man, you should get up and you should compete. You should compete with the person you were yesterday. And you said, what can I do to be a better version of the person I'm supposed to be? To mold and fashion my life, to be the kind of person God has created me to be, to serve for the common good, someone who is more like Christ. So, look at the options. So we can have an example of some bad, weak men. These are what I call lackeys. These are men who do not have strength, they don't have character, they don't have integrity, they can't follow through, they're not reliable, they are controlled by things outside of themselves, their passions, their anger, their emotion. They're controlled in ways where they're controlled by computer consoles and gaming systems, and they do not have control of their life. At the same time, they're bad. That is to say, they don't have a moral center. There are sometimes people who are committed to doing things that are not good, but sometimes they're just uncommitted. They'll just go with the flow, and they do not ask the question, what is the right thing to do? They ask the question, what is the easy thing to do? You know, all of life pushes us to the path of least resistance. It takes a special kind of courage for a man to say, you know what, I'm going to go against the flow. I'm going to go against my own impulses. I'm going to choose to go against those desires that are working against my manhood and me becoming a significant person. Now, lackeys are interesting because a lot of times they're isolated alone because that's just easier. But other times they get particularly dangerous when they pack up. That is to say, there's 2, 3, 4 of them who agree. They even celebrate the irresponsibility. They celebrate their passions and the things that are controlling them. And when they pack up, they become just a scary, scary force. Now, they become very scary when they find a leader, and the leader is the tyrant. This is a person who is strong and bad. This person can be intelligent. They can be talented. They can have skills. They can have money. They have strength. And they bring their strength to task for things that are not worthy of their humanity or their manhood. They do things like control, and they gain power, and they gain wealth. They are bullies. They like to push down. Sometimes they don't even realize it. Sometimes they're very accomplished at many things. But at the end of the day, they are for them. They are about them. These are the ones we tend to think about when we tend to think about a negative view of humanity. Now, when tyrants lead lackeys, it can become a thing. It can become a movement. It can become something quite abusive and quite scary. And because this has happened at different times in different places in the world, we become very frightened about manhood. We become very frightened about powerful men because we've seen the abuse over and over again. Now, a third category is good, weak men. Now, this looks like, maybe a good thing. Maybe we should teach men to do is, don't listen to their ambitions, don't listen to their passions, this desire for adventure, this creativity that desires to make things better, the natural inclination to protect. All that should be pushed down because the narrative is that everything bad in the world that has ever happened is the fault of men, has come from men, and therefore you should apologize for it. So a good man will be a man who will stay weak. A good man is a man who will not assert themselves. A good man is a man who will spend a lot of time apologizing for himself and for other men. And this is what's often called good. This is currently what our culture is celebrating. Men who are weak, but who have a moral center. They would never be a tyrant. In fact, they might oppose tyrants if they're told to. They might know the things that they should stand against when they get the list to stand against. And they're very concerned not so much with being a good person, but seeming to be a good person, to stand for the right things, to virtue signal in the same way. And here's the trick about this, is that men who fall into this mindset are trying to do things to get people who like that to like them, to try to get people to say, hey, I'm on your side, I'm one of the good guys. But here's the deal. When you stand for things that are not of God, that are good, so that people will like you, they are never going to like you. What's worse, they're not going to respect you. And when they don't respect you, you will not respect yourself. You will be at war with yourself. A weak person is a person who doesn't develop their skills, is not a growing person, is not a person who's learning new skills, reading new books, trying to improve themselves, trying to make themselves better, learning how to be emotionally stable and physically taking care of themselves and learning traits and skills so that they have more to contribute. A weak person is a person who can't take care of themselves. They need someone else to take care of them. And so overall, they are a net liability rather than being a person who can at the very least care for themselves, let alone be a person who grows to the point that they have something to give beyond what they give for themselves. And so potentially this can be the most unhelpful and, can I just say, dangerous group that can be out there, because they have the appearance of being good, but they are not strong. What we need, my friends, are good, strong men. I'm not talking about arrogant. I'm not talking about necessarily loud. I'm not talking about, insisting on being in charge and grunting and smelling and scratching. I'm not talking about all that. I'm talking about a man who is centered on God, who has a relationship with Jesus Christ. They know who they are and who created them, and they have a vision for their life. This is a person who is developing skills, who's developing abilities. This is a person who wakes up in the morning and say, how can I do something better? How can I make something better? This is a person who, golly, they make their bed, they clean their room, they take responsibility for themselves, and they grow to become the kind of person, listen now, that other people can rely on. We need some good men. And you know who would believe this more than anything else? Women who haven't seen good examples of this. Because the temptation in our culture now is to give up on manhood, to say we don't need it, and we are killing ourselves for doing this. Instead of saying what we need is we need powerful, amazing men who, if they were bad, they would be scary. But because they are good, they stand between us and the bad men. And if we don't have that as a culture, we are going to be broken. Now, I'm not saying anything. We need good, strong women. It's another sermon another day. But we need good, strong men. Now, the Bible is full of examples for us of both amazing men and women who were people who were good and strong, people who were people of character. And dads, this is why, as a father, for you to learn these stories, to read these stories, and tell these stories to your kids. The Bible says we're supposed to be telling these stories as we walk along paths, or as we sit at the table, as we're laying down to go to bed. Let me tell you the story about King David. Let me tell you the story about Paul, the apostle who was in prison. Let me tell you the story about the great warriors in the Old Testament. Let me tell you about John when he was in prison in the island of Patmos and the people who were faithful. And moms and dads too, you should be telling the story of Esther and Deborah and the great and powerful women who were the people who were meant to inspire. Because this is the thing, all their stories are complicated, all their stories have pluses and minuses, but they're human. And what it does is it begins to create a vision in a kid's life that I could be something great. I could be something powerful for God. It begins to help them to see that I have a responsibility in my life to take responsibility for my life. Now, I just want to share quickly 3 examples, some of my favorite stories. And the first one is this guy by the name of Jonathan. Now, here's what I love about Jonathan. Jonathan was the son of King Saul, and he was a great man who had a messed up father. If you were to do a study of King Saul, first king of Israel, you would see that he had a major problem. His major problem was fear. And one of the things that keeps men from being great is fear and insecurity. If you would not deny your fear and insecurity, men, if you would not ignore it, but if you would come to aware of it, bring it into the light, bring it to God, and understand how your insecurity expresses itself, you could be free from it. You say, I get loud when I'm insecure. I shrink back when I get insecure. I try to take control when I'm insecure. Rather than living in that thing that's controlling, you could come back and you could manage your fear, because all of us have fear. And so if you did a study of Saul's life, you would see something like a dozen times it says, and Saul was afraid, and Saul was afraid, and Saul was afraid. He was afraid of the people. He was afraid of the prophet. He was afraid of being a leader. He was afraid of not being a leader. He was afraid of other competent people. There was this other guy who came along. His name was David. David was an incredibly competent warrior. People loved him and followed him. And rather than celebrating that and helping that nourish in this young man, he became threatened by him. And so he had to push down other competent people. Well, this is Saul. The amazing thing is he had a son named Jonathan who was absolutely amazing. If you study the life of Jonathan, he is always doing the hard thing, the right thing. He is inspiring things. People are following him. He is the guy who becomes a true and loyal friend. There's one point in the story of Saul and Jonathan where Saul became so enraged, because this is the companion, by the way, of fear. When fear goes unchecked in a man, you know what comes with it? Anger. And that's the thing that defines Saul. Jonathan had a father who was fearful and angry. I know we don't have problems like that today, but they did back then. And at one point, he became so enraged with his son, he lost control and he threw a spear at him to kill him. Just like fathers sometimes lose control and throw words at sons, and sometimes when they land, they leave deep marks. Well, Jonathan was a person, because he knew who he was, knew who God was, he had a great group of friends, he becomes a great man, a man who inspires. And this is just one of the stories. It's one of the stories during the time when the children of Israel were fighting the Philistines. And this is kind of the geopolitical, technological situation. And to understand this will help you understand this whole period. You'll understand the life of David and Saul and Jonathan better. There were two things that were going on that was causing the Philistines to dominate the children of Israel. One was that they had discovered metallurgy before the children of Israel. They were first to get to the Iron Age, and so they had the ability to make armor, to make swords, and to make chariots. And so they dominated the warfare. They dominated the flatlands. At this time, the children of Israel are fighting with sticks. They're fighting with slings. This is David and Goliath time. They do not have the advantage. Now, the other thing is that because they dominated the flatlands, whenever there was the war, the children of Israel ran up into the mountains. They became guerrilla fighters. Now, this all sounds fine, except all the crops grew in the flatlands. And so slowly, the children of Israel, under Saul's leadership, were withering away. They were being harassed and defeated. Well, one day, Jonathan, his son, is up in the rocks, and he's looking down, and he says, why don't we go fight? Why don't we go do something about this? He's the kind of guy that just is not okay with things being broken. And he's constantly standing up to his father, who again is a frightened, angry dude. It takes a special kind of courage to stand up against a frightened, angry dude. And Jonathan does that. But look what he says. He's looking down. Just imagine him looking down and saying, those Philistines, they got the chariots, they got the wall. And by the way, they had swords, and most of the children of Israel didn't. In fact, there's one place where it says in the army of the children of Israel, there were two people who had swords, Jonathan and King Saul. Everybody else was fighting with some other kind of more primitive weapon. But this is what Jonathan said. It said, Jonathan said to the young man who carried his armor, and this is the deal. If you are a Jonathan, there's a young man watching you. In the position you're at work, in the position you're at as a father, as a coach, and how you live life, you have an opportunity to inspire. In fact, I would go so far to say you will inspire. You will always inspire. You will inspire people to greatness, to modeling after you, to being the best version of themselves, or you will inspire to the things like anger and resentment and despair. You can be an amazing example, a life-giving example, or a bad example that steals the life out of them. You have power when you do that. Look what it says. He says to the young man carrying his armor, come, let us go over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. That's why they call the Philistines, because they weren't circumcised, and so that's what they called them. And he says, let's go down there. He says, it may be that the Lord will work for us, for nothing can hinder the Lord from saving by many or few. So he points to God. He says, God's calling us to do this. I'm going to do this. And this is the thing that I love. And his armor bearer said to him, do all that is in your heart. Do as you wish. Behold, I am with you, heart and soul. And that's the kind of guy Jonathan was. He was the kind of guy who inspired other people to say, yes, I will follow you. I will go with you. We got to make this happen. And this is because Jonathan was always advocating for the people. He was advocating in ways where the king was abusive. He stood up to him. There was times when the king wasn't letting them eat. He stood up to him. There were times when the king was just doing silly things, and Jonathan looked out for the people. He inspired deep loyalty to the point his father became threatened to him. He was a faithful friend, and that kind of character and integrity was absolutely just inspiring. That's why you need to understand, Dad, your ability to inspire your kid is breathtaking, is powerful, is stunning. It is your first call. It is the most important thing. This is why you strive to be a person of character and integrity, a growing person, because there are people who are following and watching you. One of the things we're getting ready to do, starting this fall and going into the next year, is we're looking at taking mentoring completely seriously. That is to say, getting some older men to come alongside younger men who have skills, ability, spiritual growth, who have done some things, and just spend some time with some younger men. And the understanding is, you may say, I don't know how to teach, I don't know what I'd say, I don't know the curriculum. What if you just talked and let them ask questions or did an activity together, or you have a skill or a trade or a talent or a hobby that someone could come and do with you? And we're going to do this for men and for women, but the point is this, is that that's the ability to inspire. And we have disconnected the generations from each other. We're going to try to reconnect them because men need to be inspiring men. Now, the second example is this dude named Caleb. My second son's named Caleb. I named him that for this reason in this story. Caleb is a person who believed in always going for the high ground. So this is what we need to know about Caleb. Caleb was one of 2 of 10 spies that when the children of Israel came out of Egypt, they came to the promised land and God said, there it is, go get them. And so the people were nervous about it because there were people there that they were going to have to fight. There were obstacles. It was going to be a challenge because anything worth doing takes a challenge. It costs service and sacrifice, and it takes great leaders to call them to do that. So they sent these 10 spies to go in, and they say, this is a great land flowing with milk and honey. Go check it out. Well, 8 of the people came back, and they said, you know what? It is a land flowing with milk and honey, but there are giants in this land. The people are numerous. There's too much. We should not do this. This is dangerous, too risky. They exaggerated the problem. They underestimated God's call, and they filled the people with fear. Well, there were 2 guys that said, what are you talking about? Joshua and Caleb came back and said, God has called us. This is the place. This is our destiny. Let's go for it. But the people, because they were new to freedom and they only knew how to be slaves, they gave in to their fear, and God said, okay, go wander in the wilderness for 40 years, and I will bring the next generation in. What ends up happening is under the leadership of Joshua, they go in, they start conquering the land, and they conquer a large portion of the land, and then they start distributing this land, and Caleb has something to say about this. So this is Caleb, who was one of the 2 who wanted to go in, who's been a faithful general under Moses, now under Joshua, who now is one of the prime people who should just be able to get whatever he wants in terms of the land. Look what it says. He says, I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea. That's where the spies went in. To spy out the land and brought him word, spy out the land, and I brought him word against as was in my heart. Again, as was in my heart. I said to Moses, we can do this. We got to do this. My passion has always been to this. This is our destiny. He said, you remember that story. He said, but my brothers who went up with me made the heart of the people melt. Yet I wholly followed the Lord my God. He said, they didn't want to do the right thing. I want to do the right thing. I've been doing the right thing. I've been calling us to do the right thing for a long time. So I've been consistent. I'm like 80 now, totally different time, but I'm the same person. Now look what he says. So now give me the hill country of which the Lord spoke on that day. Now let me say a couple things about the hill country. First things is, the hill country is the hill country. The prime real estate is the flatlands, is along the river, lots of water, good crops. He wants the high ground. He wants the rocky area. There are 2 reasons. 1, it's going to be the biggest challenge. And 2, it's the part of the land that has not been conquered yet. And so this general was not okay with any part of this land not being in the hands of God. Without God's vision for this being God's land, to not be done. And so rather than saying, what's the path of resistance? What's the easy? I've done enough. I've paid a price. I was right, they were wrong. He said, I am taking this leverage. I'm taking this right to claim any real estate in this land. I want the high ground. I want the hard thing. I'm going to choose the path of great resistance rather than going the path of least resistance. He says, so you have heard that the day how the Anakites were there with great fortified cities. He says, there's cities there, there's challenges there. He says, that's what I want for me and my descendants. He says, it may be that the Lord will be with me and I shall drive them out just as the Lord said. And so he's a guy who leans into challenge, who does hard things, who understands that the meaning in life, the challenge in life, the sense of adventure is the person who says, I'm going to take some risks. I'm going to go for some things. I'm going to look at problems. I'm going to say, I'll help fix that problem. I'm going to be, when everyone else says, I don't want to be in charge, I don't want responsibility, say, I'll be in charge. I'll take leadership. And they do it with wisdom and strength and consistency and service and sacrifice. These are people who take the high grounds. And men, we need to regularly be challenging ourselves to do hard things. Some of you say, you know what, I don't read. Read. Can you read? Well, then read. Find something you are curious about, a biography, a history, a skill. Listen to it on the audiobook, something you don't know. Listen to your curiosity. You say, there's a new skill. I want to learn how to play an instrument. I want to learn how to language. I want to learn about nutrition and start taking better care of my body. I want to do something that's hard. I want to grow past where I'm at. This is the spirit and the perspective of Caleb. Now, third guy, and I just love this guy, this is Gideon. He is the mighty man of valor. Now, this is what you need to understand about the time of Gideon. Gideon is one of the judges. Now, there's a period between Moses and Joshua and the kings that was called the time of the judges, when the people were still very tribal, and so they were separate, but they were one. And every now and again, not every now and again, over and over again, they fell into this pattern. Things were pretty good, God's blessing them. They forgot and took God for granted, turned to false gods and immoral, bad behavior, started treating each other poorly. Bad things happened. Enemies came in, they lost their unity, it all fell apart. They cry out to God. God sends them a deliverer or a judge, okay? Men, women who came and led them, great leaders who brought them back to God. God restores them. And then after a while, take God for granted, do bad things happen. Call it to God, God delivers them. This is 400 years of judges. And it would be very easy to judge the people during the time of judges, but they sound a lot like me. And they sound a lot like us. Learning to be free, learning to trust in God. Well, one of these judges is this guy by the name of Gideon. And this is during a time where they're being dominated by a different group of people called the Midianites. And they were coming in, there were just jillions of them, and they just were harassing the people of God. And the people were now hiding up in those hills, hiding up in those mountains, some of which Caleb had conquered. Now watch this. While his son Gideon, so it says the angel of the Lord appeared to this guy Gideon, and while his son Gideon was beating out wheat in a wine press to hide from the Midianites. So here's Gideon. He snuck down from the mountains. He says, we don't get some food, we're going to starve. So he sneaks out in the field at night. He gathers a bunch of wheat. He dumps it into this hole. Now the hole is a wine press. It's a carved out place in rock that's below ground, and when they gathered grapes, they'd put the grapes in and they'd squash them, and this was a wine press. And so he's hiding in a hole, getting what he needs to survive. It sounds like a lot of young men I know who have incredible potential, but there are forces against them, and they're hiding out, and they're just eking by. And God comes to Gideon, and look what he says to him. It's glorious. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him, and he said to him, the Lord is with you. Now, the first thing you need to remember, Gideon, is that you are not alone. There is a God who's created you, empowered you, called you to great things. You are capable of more because God is with you. And look what he calls him. He says this. He says, God is with you. So rise up, O mighty man of valor. Now, here's the deal. Gideon is in that hole. He is not a mighty man of valor, but he will be. And this is what I love about Gideon. The next couple stories are Gideon has to learn what character and sacrifice and leader looks like. He's got to stand up to his own fears. He's got to, next story, he's got to stand up to his family that is fairly dysfunctional. He's got to grow. He's got to become. And then God puts people around him. He's got to learn to trust God. And he's going to win a victory that is powerful in a way that he would have never seemed. If you would have looked at him and said, this is just a dude just struggling to survive, he grew past that. That is to say, he was a person who grew, who overcame their limitations. One of the things that men have to get over is just the bad narrative about themselves. They may say, you don't understand, Paul, I am just a loser. I've made mistakes. I've got addictions in my life. I've got things I don't seem to be able to overcome. There's no potential in me. That is a lie from the pit of hell. If you have God in your life, then the power of God is in your life, and you can do great things. You know, we could put that chart up again of the 4 different categories, and here's just something you need to know about me. I have been all 4 of those guys. I have been the weak, bad person who was controlled by things outside of myself, who was selfish, who was just seeing which way the wind was going to blow and was going to take the path of least resistance. There have been days, there have been seasons in my life that might have been the best description of me. There are other times where I've been a tyrant. I've had little bits of power, particularly when I was young, and because of my fear and my insecurity. I was about control. I was very verbal. I could use words in ways that could degrade people and control people and manipulate. I have been that tyrant guy at times and seasons and instances in my life. There have been times where I've been the one who I just want everyone to like me. So I'm going to figure out what you want to say. I'm going to act like the good guy. I'm going to be the good, weak man. And I just, want to virtue signal and have everybody feel good about me. And I don't really respect myself, and I don't think you respect me. But do you like me? I've been that guy in my times of insecurity and seasons. And then there have been other times when the very best version of myself has come forward, where I've understood more and more as I grow, because years comes with wisdom. That's why older men need to talk with younger men, okay? What does wisdom look like? It looks like, understanding that I am called to good things, and I need to be an improving person and a growing person, a person who strives after Jesus, a person who learns all the skills a man should learn, a person, people say, I don't know what's in the Bible. It ain't that hard. Start by picking it up and reading it. And then, get one of the jillion resources we provide for you about how to read and how to read it intelligently and how to apply it. So that'll take some time, that's some work. But when you become that, you become a good, strong man. And what I love about Gideon is he was a man who saw himself as one who was becoming. And he didn't let the limitations of his youth keep him becoming a great man. And so if you're here and maybe you're subtly depressed and you're knocked down and you've told yourself a story that I can't really do anything, I just better play it differently, just reject that lie. And it might look like in your life you got to do some things. Just, I'm going to put the gaming council away for 3 months. You know what? I'm going to get an accountability group for the stuff I've been looking for, on the internet, stuff I've been looking to. You know what? I'm going to start taking care of myself. I'm going to get up. I'm going to make my bed. I'm going to clean my room. You know what? I'm going to learn a skill. I'm going to get in a class here at church. I'm going to learn some different thing. I'm going to change the pattern of my life. Because listen, your life is designed to get the results you're currently getting. And if you want to change your life, redesign your life. And there's just certain things that I'm not doing those for a while. I'm not eating this for a while. I'm not hanging out in this place for a while. I had a guy tell me a while back, he said, you don't understand, Paul. Every time I go to the bar, I get in trouble. You know what I said to him? Don't go to the bar, dude. What am I supposed to do? Oh, I don't know. The 20 million other things you could do. I joked with him, and he laughed, and we talked, and we made a plan and said, here's a rule. I'm just not going to go there. Give it 3 months. What are you going to do? I'm going to join this group. I'm going to get in this group. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to act in this activity. I'm going to take this class. And I'm going to make investments in myself to be more positive so that I can rise up and become a mighty man of valor, a man who fights the right battles in the right way, a person who is like Jesus, who was the person who did not take the path of least resistance, who lived with passion and adventure and gave himself, who stepped into the high ground. Because that very land that Caleb would conquer, one day part of it would become the city Jerusalem, city of peace, city of David. It wasn't the city then, but outside that city, Jesus would take another patch of high ground. It was called Calvary. And he would go and do the thing that only he could do, the thing that it was going to take a courageous man to do, the right thing, service and sacrifice. And it's made all the difference. We want to be like that, men. We want to be like that. One of the things I do is I read the story of great men and great women. I mean, just people who will inspire me. And histories, biographies, Christian presidents, military leaders, business leaders. And here's the thing I always find. It's always a mixed bag. There are things great, other things like, not so great. And that's just the complexity of their times and their life. And all of us, And so I don't judge them by their worst moments. I don't praise them for their best moments. I get a picture. But someone who I just did some background reading, biography work on, who I never had, I can't believe I never had, I never looked deeply at Teddy Roosevelt, one of the presidents who we have forgotten that we need to remember. We put dude's face on Mount Rushmore, and there's a reason. He was a man who stood for really hard things against his own party, against popular sentiment, voting for women, inclusion of the poor. He stood against big, crushing business and monopoly during the Gilded Age, where all power was business. He changed paradigms that now, for us today, are just assumptions of what is right. And he was one of the first people to do that. He was a warrior. He was always growing. He read a book every day. He was a person who grew, and he was always in the fight till his dying day. Well, one of the things he wrote was a speech. And in this speech, he spoke about the man in the arena. And I believe that this is a call for us to get a new vision for our life. Let's just look at what he said, and then I want to close this in prayer. It is not the critic who counts, Teddy Roosevelt said, nor the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again. Because there is no effort without error and shortcomings, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor know defeat. It seems to me that this is the heart of a man. This is a call for us to say there are three kinds of people. People who strive and do, people who strive and struggle, and people who sit on the sidelines and criticize both. The one person you don't want to be is the third person. Because when you realize you are holding everybody in disdain, in sarcasm, you're also holding yourself in disdain and disrespect. And that, my friends, my brothers, is no way to live. Let's pray together. Father God, I just pray for the men of our church. I pray for the men hearing this. I pray that they would not be crushed or discouraged, but rather they would come back. And they would see that there is a God who has created them for a purpose. God who has called them to be a better versions of themselves. And I pray each one of us would get a new vision for our life. That we could be more, we could strive more. We could not only take responsibility for ourselves, but we could be someone who others could lean on. We could step into problems and challenges and difficulties, and we could make things better. We could dare greatly. We could give ourselves to a worthy cause, being fathers, being friends, being coaches, being teachers, being good mentors. Father God, I just pray for a movement among men, that they would rise up and they would hear God saying, "Rise up, O mighty men in valor." Even they would see the example of Christ and follow it wholeheartedly with passion. For it's in his name we pray. Amen.